All right, y'all. Welcome back to the channel. I'm really excited today to have Joe Brown on from Heresy Financial. We are going to be discussing the de-dollarization and its potential impacts moving forward, what that may or may look like here in America as far as the dollar for a medium of exchange. Welcome to the channel, Joe. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
And what I will do is we'll link Joe's channel down below. Joe has a lot of really awesome financial insights and information on his channel. So definitely go check out Joe and subscribe. But Joe, why don't you give us a little bit of intro on the dollar, and that way we can get the discussion started here.
Yeah, sure thing. So, in order to kind of understand what is going on right now with any potential de-dollarization that is happening, we kind of have to answer the fundamental questions first about what is a reserve currency, really what is money. So, money is simply something that operates under a couple different functions, and so obviously it's got to be something that you can spend in order to get something that you want. So a good example, like a lot of people, like you read economics 101, they'll always go back to like a barter example. They'll say, hey, in the original economy, you had two people that bartered with each other. And anthropologically speaking, like there's no evidence that any economy ever had barter as a money system because it gets too complicated, and you'll see why in a second. So basically, let's say you and I are stranded on an island. I can fish, you can get coconuts, you can climb trees. That would be fine for barter. Now let's say we got a third guy come in and he knows how to build huts. And so now if I want a hut, I've got to go fish and I've got to give some fish to him to get a hut. But what if he says, no, I'm a vegan, I don't want any fish? So now if I want a hut, I got to fish extra, go to you to get coconuts from you, and then get the coconuts just to get my hut. And so that's just three people. And now I have to get something other than what I am able to produce in order to get something that I want. Now imagine you have 4 people, 10 people, 100 people, let alone 8 billion people. And every single person has their own skills on what they have to offer in terms of value to society. And so very quickly, what you'll find that happens is the society, whatever size it is, will settle in on one thing that operates as the medium of exchange. So in our island example, it may very well end up being coconuts, where you have 10 people get stranded there. It's like, well, that's the one thing that most people can kind of use the most, and that like maybe 6 out of the 10 people always want coconuts. Therefore, I will always have to get coconuts because I know they'll take it. And since now I'm trying to get it to get what I want, now I'll always take coconuts, and it's a self-reinforcing cycle. And so that's the function of the medium of exchange. There's a second function, though, that money typically holds, which is preserving your purchasing power into the future. And so this is an example where coconuts might not do a very good job of this, because if I store up a lot of labor from fishing, I get coconuts. I fish some more, get more coconuts. Fish more, get more coconuts. I go into my little hole that I dug for coconuts, and over the course of a year, I've been storing up all these coconuts because I think I'm just going to pay for the biggest, best hut on the island. I go in there to get my coconuts out, and they're rotted away. They're dry. The rats ate them. There's nothing left. So all of my labor now I produced, and I didn't get any value back from society for all the labor that I produced. So the money has to have some sort of staying power, sticking power. It's got to be able to preserve the value of my stored labor into the future. And that's one of the reasons why gold served as money for so long throughout history, because it doesn't rust, it doesn't decay, it doesn't just go away. It's hard to counterfeit.
It's store value. Yep.
Yeah, so it'll store your value into the future, and because of the fact that it's easily recognizable, it's hard to mine. It kind of became that one thing. The technical name for it is the coincidence of wants, that solves like that problem of like, well, what do I need to get in order to have something that somebody else will take for the stuff that I want? And that's why gold just evolutionarily, bottom up, organically became money for so long. So then the question is, well, if it was so good as money, then why did it ever get replaced? And that was through a series of both free market problem solving and government intervention. So
Right.
one problem that you have with gold is the natural deflation that happens over time. Prices just go down because you have so much more wealth, but the money doesn't like increase very quickly.
Mhm.
And so the gold becomes too valuable. So you've got to store it somewhere. You're not going to be paying for a sandwich with 1 ounce of gold. That's enough to buy a horse or a down payment on a house or whatever. So you're going to have to store it somewhere. And so you give it to the bank. The other thing that giving it to the bank solved was buying stuff from over a large distance. Like if we had to send gold coins to China to buy stuff from China, it'd be too expensive. So we'd never have the iPhone. We would never have, cheap clothes and toys in the 90s. And we never have all the stuff that we've gotten from global commerce. And those are probably, two really terrible examples. But globalism did bring a lot of increased wealth around the world because you have unlocked and untapped skills and value and labor from all around the world. And it started hundreds of years ago. It's because you could transfer the ownership of the gold instead of having to transfer the gold itself. And that's a lot cheaper. And so if I have to send the gold, it's going to be very expensive. It might cost me 2 ounces of gold for every ounce of gold that I want to send. Whereas if I just need to send the ownership of the gold to somebody else, then that could be close to free. And so that's what banking did. And then ultimately central banking did, and allowed a greater efficiency in transacting across long distances. The problem that obviously popped up there was the fraud, right? Because if you're just transferring the ownership of the gold, then how do I verify the gold is actually there? And many times you can't. And so you think you're transferring the ownership of gold when really there's no gold being transferred. It's the fraud. It's the promise of ownership of gold without there being enough gold there. And that's what led to every bank run. And that's what led to central banks. And then the central bank runs, what led to the dollar in 1945, after World War II, Europe had spent all of its gold on the war. And it just, the United States was the place where all that money went. They were buying stuff from us. And so after World War II, they said, okay, we've got our paper money. Instead of having our paper money be redeemable for gold, we're going to have it redeemable for dollars because dollars are redeemable for gold. So that was the start of the dollar as the reserve currency of the world. And up until that point, it was always gold. Like all money, it was like backed up by gold. And so it was still at that point, gold was money. It wasn't really the dollar was the reserve currency. It was gold. It was just a roundabout way to get there. And that's why the dollar became the global reserve currency, because the United States that issued the dollar was the only country left with gold. So that's why the dollar became the global reserve currency. And so because it was gold, it was like you still solve the issue of it being money, which is it preserves your purchasing power over a long period of time. And it's the medium of exchange because everybody was transacting with gold before, and now they're still transacting with gold, just in a roundabout way. And then obviously the United States did the exact same thing that every fraudulent bank had ever done, which is issue more promises to redeem gold than they actually had gold in the vault. And the world caught on and started to redeem their dollars for gold in 1971. And there was not enough gold. So the gold window closed permanently from then. But it stuck. The dollar was already in use. Everybody was already used to using the dollar, and nobody had gold reserves at that time, not nearly enough to back their own money supply at that time with gold. And so dollars stuck, in addition to the fact that the United States made the deal with Saudi Arabia to protect them militarily, so that if you needed to buy oil, you had to get dollars first. And that's another one of those examples, like the coconut example. Like if you're a country and you need oil, well, first you have to go get dollars to go get oil get oil now. So that cemented the dollar in place as the reserve currency. So that's kind of the really long history of where we got to where we are, how we got to where we are today. And now many people, like you said, are talking about de-dollarization. And what happens if that just fails, the dollar ends, and it's probably when it happens, it's probably not going to be happening as soon as many people are thinking, because money has staying power. It's always a winner-take-all game, and there's a lot of momentum behind it. And 1971 didn't knock it off its tracks. And if that didn't knock it off its tracks, then the things that are happening today are negative, but are they as significant as that? It's yet to be seen. And so there's really two ways that the dollar operates as that global reserve currency. It operates in the realm of like being being reserves, like savings for nations and central banks and sovereign wealth funds and large institutions. It also operates as the currency for international trade. So it's the same thing as before. It's savings and medium of exchange, but on a large scale, like for nations. In terms of it being used for international trade, there's no de-dollarization, at least yet. It's literally like you track it since 1980, and the share of dollars being used in global trade has not gone anywhere. And that's even more significant because the United States GDP as a percentage of global GDP has actually shrunk. So the United States GDP makes up a smaller share of global GDP, but there's still just as many dollars being used as before.
And this was actually my thought exercise or concept of the death of the petrodollar or the de-dollarization of the dollar as the world currency, why it may not have an immediate impact as many people are predicting because of globalization and because we've been a global economy. And while that has hurt us as an American economy, and that definitely hurts us in the long run, in my opinion, and it creates unnecessary it creates unintended consequences. There's a very good chance that it could be a very slow burn for the dollar, and it might not be as cataclysmic. The reason that most people are predicting a cataclysmic event uh, for the dollar is just this whole CBD, central bank digital currency segue, and they're predicting that that's what's going to create the segue. Um, and that's what I just wanted to discuss with you is the fact that there's a really good possibility that while the dollar will be impacted, while we do have hyperinflation and different things like that, it might not be as catastrophic because everything does have value, right? And all those things that have value from our perspective are purchased in dollars, and therefore um, those items retain their value. And if somebody wants them to purchase them from us, they have to do it in dollars.
Okay, so there's a couple different pieces to that, and part of it I would agree with, and then part of it I would say is maybe maybe a little bit more more severe of an issue.
Okay.
So the international trade piece, there's the main reason why I think that there has not been any decline in usage of the dollar for international trade is the buildup of debt, because when I borrow money. I can't borrow in Joe Bucks because what is the guarantee that Joe Bucks are going to have any purchasing power? I can print as many Joe Bucks as I want. I have to borrow in dollars, and that's because I can't control dollars. And so the person who is lending to me has some sort of a third party guarantee that they're going to get back their purchasing power. It's the same thing for almost every nation on earth. They can't borrow in their own currency that they control. They can only borrow in dollars. So when you look at dollar denominated debt around the world, it's in the neighborhood of $65 trillion.
Wow.
Global GDP is only a little over $100 trillion. And so over 60% of global GDP, the size, that's how much dollar denominated debt there is. And so what happens to that debt? Like, it's going to have to get paid because it's not just one issuer that decides to default. It's a bunch of different borrowers. And so how do I pay off dollar debt? I have to go out there, produce something to give to somebody that they want badly enough to give me dollars for, and then I have to take those dollars to pay them back. So the $64 trillion of dollar debt is inherently demand $64 trillion worth of demand for dollars, because that means all those nations have to go find dollars to pay back that dollar debt. Now, if they all decided all at once, hey, we're just going to default and not pay back, then yeah, that crushes the dollar. But what are the chances that all these nations all at the same time that disagree with each other, and especially if they're the only ones that do it, that just impacts them negatively. It doesn't do anything
Right.
to the dollar. Like it's there's basically a zero chance of that right now. And so the dollar debt is what solidifies that. But there's that's good for now. It's not good for a long time though. It's like it's glue that evaporates over time. And the reason why is because the second piece for dollars, which is reserves. So when you look at central bank holdings of dollars, when you look at sovereign wealth funds, when you look at holdings of treasuries, that's on a huge decline. So yes, countries need dollars for payment, but they're not saving in dollars anymore.
Right.
They're
Okay.
actively drawing down on their dollar reserves as savings.
Like China
And
and India are buying
Japan.
up gold like out of like incredible tons and tons of gold.
Yes, when you add up all the gold that's being bought by, and sold by all central banks and you net it out together, central banks are buying more gold right now than they've bought for the last 70 years. It's unprecedented how much gold is being bought right now. At the same time, the world is dumping, or maybe not dumping, but actively getting rid of treasuries. So when you look at foreign holdings of treasuries, that stockpile is dwindling. Before about 5 years ago, it was always growing, maybe like 6 years ago, 7 years ago. And so that's a new trend.
And
And
that's
yeah, go
what's
ahead.
fascinating about, gold, at least on charts. They always talk about prices are manipulated. We know that the dollar is manipulated. We know that China was manipulating their currency, but clearly, in my opinion, the price of gold has to be manipulated because of the known purchasing that we know is going on. Um, you would think that that would obviously impact the price, or at least the spread. It would impact, or both, which we're just not seeing that. And I know there's sophisticated ways that the really large purchasers do that with using derivatives and whatnot. But what say you, Joe, as far as with this mass influx of purchasing in massively bought quantities, why isn't gold soaring right now?
Yeah, it's actually I think it's pretty simple. If you look at what's going on behind the scenes, um, a lot of people talk about the manipulation of the paper markets and futures and things like that. But really, what's going on is you short it with one hand and you buy it with the other.
Hmm. Okay.
And so for those who aren't aware, when you short something, um, it is selling it first. So your open trade is a sell trade, and then to close that trade out, you have to buy it to close. And so when you short sell a stock, it's because you think it's going to go down. When you buy a stock, it's because you think it's going to go up. And so you can use the futures markets, which are contracts that get their
Hmm.
value based on gold, and you can short gold, making a bet that it's going to go down. That trade is a credit of cash to you. And so then you take that cash and you buy physical gold. So in this way, you're hedged, because if the price of gold does skyrocket, you have the physical gold. And so if your short starts losing your money, you can liquidate the physical in order to cover your short if you need to. But what that also does is, since you're shorting with one hand and then buying the physical with the other hand, that that on the market, it means that there's not net buying taking place, and so you are able to keep the balance between buyers and sellers balanced, so that you don't have increased buying pressure pushing up the price. And so it's a way to kind of fund your own purchasing of gold, because you can use leverage for futures, and then you don't have to push up the price, so you can keep on doing this game for as long as possible until it breaks. But meanwhile, now you have all the physical.
But you're losing on the spread though, right? But I guess if you're an institution and you kind of almost have whatever currency you're using to do it, it might be irrelevant, right? But if you could short and buy, you're going to lose on the spread every time, or Or
Well, it depends. It depends on when you close the trade out. I mean, yes, essentially, right when you open the trade, then yeah, you will most likely have a loss on that spread. But when you're doing that, like you're doing that, like these are sophisticated investors. This is big money, and so they're doing that when the price of gold is a little bit higher, and so they dump the shorts into the market, and then that pushes the price down a little bit more, and you can close out your shorts, and then you make back a little bit from your paper trading to fund
okay,
some of your physical accumulation.
okay, okay.
And
Yeah,
so
so we
it's not something that can keep on going forever. At some
right.
point, shorts are unwound. It's like that's what a short squeeze is. Like a couple of years ago, that's what AMC was and GameStop. It's like when you have a huge
Mhm.
short position, then at some point the price goes up too much. Everybody has to close out their shorts, and the price skyrockets. And it's like it's probably going to happen to gold at some point. Maybe not that extreme, but at least somewhat.
So what's your personal opinion as far as with what is happening with the de-dollarization and inflation? Where do you see things going, and what suggestions do you have for folks as far as wealth preservation, wealth accumulation, with our current economic conditions the way they are?
Yeah. So like we've been talking about it, this is not like a super short term thing. I think it is a question of when, not if. But
Hmm.
um, but at some point, this is kind of the process that plays out. Um, you have a situation where debt is at all time highs. You also have a situation where inflation is at record highs. Those two things together are very dangerous because you have to do one of two things. You have to choose the economy or the currency. You can't choose both because with the inflation running high, if you want to try and solve the debt problem, you have to print the money to do that. But that makes
Mm,
the inflation worse. And
right.
every country that's ever chosen to do that tips over into hyperinflation and destroys their currency.
Mhm.
On the other hand, you could go the other way and say, okay, well, we're going to solve the inflation problem by pushing rates up and making money more scarce. Well, that makes the debt problem really bad because
Mhm.
you've got record high piles of debt, and now servicing that debt becomes more expensive. It's like, yeah, you might have been able to service that debt load at zero interest rates, but if you loaded up on 100 grand worth of credit cards at 0% and then didn't do anything about it, and then those rates reset to 16-24% in a year after that trial period expires, then suddenly your minimum payment goes from like $300 a month to like $5,000 a month.
Right.
Like you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
And so when you see that's exactly what's going on all around the
Hmm.
world right now. You've got
Yeah.
governments, corporations, individuals, households, like everybody has record high debts, and interest rates are only skyrocketing. And so as that debt comes due, you either have to be able to earn extra income to pay off that debt, or you have to take on new debt to pay off that old debt, but that new debt is more expensive. And so we have a big problem with debt right now, that they're either going to have to say, okay, we're going to sacrifice the global economy and watch prices collapse as defaults roll through, or we're going to sacrifice the currency by papering over the debt. And so there's a real problem right now. Add on top of that, governments have fiscal problems with mandatory spending that's increasing every single year, like especially in the United States, and taxes nowhere near enough to cover it. So the governments are in the exact same situation as households and corporations are. And so at the end of the day, most often throughout history, central bankers do not choose the deflationary death spiral, even though, in my opinion, that's the healthier option.
Hmm.
It's more
Right.
painful short term, but it's a lot better to recover from. It restores the proper incentives. Most of the time, they try and paper it over while not trying to paper it over too much to cause hyperinflation. That's an impossible needle to thread. And so ultimately, that's why we're still seeing reserves of the dollar dwindle. And the way this plays out is that continues until nobody has reserves of treasuries or the dollar globally anymore, because the purchasing power is not coming back to them from it, because we're papering over the losses from the debt. And at some point, if China doesn't want dollars, They can't, and Japan doesn't want dollars, and Europe doesn't want dollars. They can't just give them to each other. It's not like China can say, hey, all right, Europe, I'm going to pay you with my dollars that I don't want, because Europe's also saying, well, I don't want dollars. You have to pay me something else. So at that point, who is the only one to accept dollars? It's the United States. And so how do they get rid of dollars then? They just buy our stuff. So they buy our stocks, they buy our land, they buy our inventory off our shelves. And that's if it happens fast, that's the painful global de-dollarization that results in hyperinflation, all those trillions of dollars flooding back home to the United States. Probably won't happen soon, and probably won't happen fast. But so the question is really, can we produce wealth faster than those dollars come home?
And so over this next hyperinflationary period, or whether, I mean, it could very easily go into like a stagflationary period. What do you recommend if, let's say you have some savings? I'm a real kind of anti stock market guy, because I see all the manipulation in that, and I believe that our government has hinted several times that they're going to ultimately hijack Wall Street. You know, like Obama hinted at the MyRA, and Biden has been hitting at different executive orders and different things. But do you have any thoughts or suggestions on, if you did have some wealth accumulation or savings, what might be some good ideas to position that wealth in this current economic environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to the question of what is money or what is savings, I think there's right now a significant portion of a portfolio should be in reserves, in savings. So a lot of people, when they hear that, they think that just means like cash, and that's not what I mean. And the reason for that is because you have to trace it back to its source. So you've got dollars. Unless you have physical cash underneath your mattress, those dollars are going to be in some sort of an account, whether it's a brokerage account or it's in a bank account. But they're not sitting there, as people have all found out now from Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank and all these banks collapsing right now. What a bank does is they take your dollar and they loan it out to somebody. They don't have it. And so your savings, if you are a saver, you are a lender. You are lending your dollars to the bank, and then your bank is in turn lending those dollars to somebody else. And 9 times out of 10, that somebody else is the United States government. And so if you're a saver, you're really a lender. And most of the time, because you're doing it through a bank, you're an interest-free lender to the United States government. And the bank is pocketing that interest rate in between. And so when I say reserves, the goal is, okay, what's gonna preserve my purchasing power for me, whether prices skyrocket or prices collapse. If prices skyrocket and my cost of living goes from 100 grand a year to 200 grand a year, I want my savings to reflect that. If I have 6 months of savings, I want that 6 months of savings to still be 6 months of savings, regardless of what prices do. And so if prices go up, that means that 6 months of savings was 50 grand, that now turns into 100 grand. If prices collapse, you might see that 50 grand turn into 25 grand, but it's still 6 months worth of savings. And so the savings, the reserves, it's not about the number, it's about the purchasing power. How much stuff can it buy for you? And so personally, for my reserves, my savings portion of my portfolio, I like the majority of it in gold. So let's say I've got 30% in reserves. I would probably want at least half of that in gold. I would want some of it in saving or in cash, like just a regular savings account, because in anywhere in the world today, you still can't pay with gold, and so you want some in dollars, in cash. And then I personally think having about 5% of your portfolio in Bitcoin is a smart move, because is there a chance it goes to zero? Yeah. And if it does, your portfolio goes from 100% to 95%. Not devastating. Is there a chance that Bitcoin becomes the next global money? Yeah, it's probably not a big chance, but there's a chance. And if it does, having 5% of your portfolio in Bitcoin will triple to quadruple your entire portfolio if Bitcoin becomes money for everybody everywhere. And so it's a put option on the dollar and a call option on on a new form of money. So not a lot, but at least a little bit. So of that, I've got 30%, let's say, in reserves or savings. 5% is Bitcoin. Let's say 20% is gold, and then the last 5% is in dollars, is in cash, and that's my savings. And then for the next 30% of my portfolio, I'm going to be in business, and that could be like I run my own business and I'm investing in it, I'm growing in it because that's producing a lot of wealth for me. That's fine. If you have a job, then that might be if you have a low income job, then that might be investing in producing learning skills that are high ROI skills so that you can make more money. Or for the majority of people, that's going to be stocks. And so whether it's a 401k or a regular brokerage account or even private businesses, there are websites that allow you to invest in non-publicly traded startup businesses. Whatever that is, I think having equity and having ownership in some sort of business is essential for producing wealth long term. And then the last 30%, I really like real estate. Whether we have deflation or inflation, if you buy cash flowing real estate, whether that's single family or multifamily, or even if you can't do that and you just want to go into REITs or syndications, it's essential because land is a scarce resource, especially land that people can live on, especially the real estate that cash flows. And having that source of income and exposure to a scarce resource is something that I think should be included in every portfolio. And you'll notice there's an extra 10% there, and I choose to use that to speculate. So sometimes I'll hedge with that. Sometimes I'll speculate on things that I think, hey, this could do really well, but if it doesn't, then I lose a little bit. And that's kind of my portfolio allocation.
Yeah, I really like that idea. And while we may, I've always liked the idea of Bitcoin. I've never understood it enough with all the it's for me, it's really a password thing. I hate passwords and the whole hard wallet, soft wallet, virtual wallet. I just haven't been able to get over my phobia of losing passwords and should I tattoo it on my forearm or whatever. So I just haven't jumped in yet. I know I think I will, because I think regardless, cryptocurrency will be a medium of exchange online moving forward, regardless. So I see like legitimate value in that. I'm a big gold and silver and dirt guy, big hard asset guy. I definitely believe in having gold and silver as a store of value. And we've spent I got out of the stock market in 2007, 2008, and then we strategically relocated in 14, and we part of our uh reasoning and philosophy behind moving was because of the cost of living where we were from was so astronomical, and we were looking to the future as far as for our children. And, is this area financially viable for the next generation to be able to accumulate dirt, right? And to be able to accumulate real estate. So we talk a lot about that on our channel. I call it dirt coin. And then we have what we call our food 401k, which is actual just growing food. I have a lot of fruit trees, so we planted and propagate a lot of fruit trees, and we have a greenhouse. And these are just different real hard assets. I know Chris at Financial Prepper, he talks about his tool 401k, and that's a little bit in the vein of what you're speaking to as far as the ability to generate an income or grow your income, and looking at that as an asset, which that's a very not talked about much, but that's really talked about in the financial planning field when it comes to like disability insurance, because one of your greatest assets is your ability to generate income, and if you lose that ability, I mean, that is a tremendous financial impact. So viewing your not just your ability to generate wealth or generate revenue, but your ability to multiply that by a factor, whether it's through developing new skills or maybe just new thought process or approach. I really like that idea as far as one way to expand your wealth is just to be uh, bring more value to the marketplace, right? And I mean, I think that's what you're doing through your businesses and what you're doing online, and that's what we've been attempting to do. Our YouTube channel basically started out when my kids were young and it was their hobby and they thought it would be cool to do. And then it was about 2 years ago, my oldest son, he's 18 now. When he was 16, he was like, you know what, Dad? He's like, I think I want to do this like as a business and I'm going to get serious about it. And he really started working on his skills, editing, and like understanding all the ins and outs with the audio and all this stuff. And so he continues to improve that. Then they started a website, and then we have merch and products that we produce to add value, bring value to the marketplace. And yeah, I really like your approach and your suggestions. I think that's really great. And bringing all of that back around to the dollar. Uh, we've been talking about this frequently on the channel. As far as with real estate, I think there's going to be tremendous real estate opportunities when we're in this weird spot. I think that we're coming into, we see the real estate market is softening and prices are going to drop. And those that have been kind of looking, that have some liquidity, are going to be able to take advantage of what's going to happen in the real estate market as as it softens. I am expecting it to get very soft, and there should be quite a few opportunities in the real estate market. What do you foresee in the near future for real estate?
Yeah, I would like to comment on. I just you said a lot there that wanted to
Great. Okay.
I wanted to comment on, but I'll answer the question about real estate too. I'm sure everybody has heard this story, but there's a story of the guy on the island who was fishing, and there was an investment banker from New York who was on vacation there, and he watches this local who fishes for an hour, 2 hours in the morning. He goes out, he catches a couple fish, but as soon as he catches, let's say 6 fish, he finishes up for the day. He goes to the market, he sells his 6 fish, and then he buys what he needs for his family for the day, and then he literally just sits on the beach the rest of the day and hangs out. And the guy's like, hey, look, you've got an opportunity here. Like you could you could get a boat and go out and fish, if fish for a couple more hours each day, save up enough to be able to buy a boat, and the boat out, and you can get more fish when you take the boat out to get fish instead of fishing from the shore. The guy's like, okay, and then what? He's like, well, then you can, with that extra money, you can hire people and buy a few more boats and send them out. Now you have a little company. And the guy's like, okay, and then what? And he's like, well, you take that and you scale it up, and eventually you get to the point where you could even probably, I could help you take this thing public, and you could get a bunch of investors. And he's like, and then what? He's like, you could grow a giant, company, and you could sell your fish all over the world, and then eventually get to the point where you can cash out of the company that we took public, and you can retire. And the guy's like, and then what? He said, then you can sit on the beach and fish all day. And it's kind of like
Great story, great analogy.
It is, and it makes you think, okay, well, the point of the story is, okay, what is real wealth? And it's like, you have to have the end goal in mind, and not just look at a number. You have to be looking at, okay, what's the purpose, and what am I doing this for, and what am I going to be able to do with this? The place that story falls apart is that it's like, okay, well, what if one day there's not enough fish? Like he goes out to fish for a whole day and he doesn't catch anything. Then he goes hungry in the first example. In the second example, if he goes through the whole process, it's like he's doing that for enjoyment, not out of desperation and necessity. And so there is something to be said about making sure that you do the things and check the boxes that are like, that take the toil and take years and a lot of investment into, in order to get yourself to a place where you're not living out of desperation, but you're living out of freedom. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think that's important. In terms of real estate, this is one of my most controversial opinions, and I say that because every time I talk about it, people say that I'm wrong and I'm misleading people. I have very few people that agree with me about this, except for professional real estate investors. I think right now there's a ton of fear in real estate. Uh, the only people that I talk to that are not afraid of real estate right now, like I said, are the professional real estate investors. Everybody else, everybody is saying I'm waiting for the crash. That maybe they bought something, but it's only out of necessity. There are very, very, very few people. There's no euphoria in real estate right now. Let me put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not the sign of a bubble. If you're just looking at euphoria versus greed, that's actually the sign of a bottom. So what is driving that? Well, recent memory of the financial crisis is driving that, number one. And the fact that prices look similar. But prices alone are not a determinant of a bubble. You have to look at supply and demand to know whether something is priced at a point that is unreasonable. And when you look at the production of houses over the last 40 years, about 20 years ago, the production of houses, new housing units, so that includes apartments, it flatlined. We are technically at an all-time high for the number of housing units versus the population. But the chart goes like this. It's like it goes up and to the right, and then about the 80s, it just moves sideways. And we can't see it all the way here, but it moves sideways for a long time. And then right now we're like a little bit higher than that line. And what that total housing units versus population chart doesn't account for is demographic trends. So a lot of these housing units are not big enough for 6 people. Like you used to have a family of 4 to 6 living in a tiny 1,200 square foot house. That doesn't happen anymore. Families
Mm-hmm.
are 4 people, if that. You have couples living together. You have housing units that are apartments that are studios and single bedrooms. And so the number of people per housing unit has dropped dramatically over that period of time, meaning that the number of people who need a place to live versus the places there are to live is nowhere near what it's been throughout history. We have a severe housing shortage, and that's why prices are so high. We don't have empty houses right now. And the reason you know that is because house prices would have dropped by now from interest rates going up. But they haven't because nobody's selling, because nobody can afford to sell because they're
Right.
locked into those low rates. And if there was a housing glut where there are lots of empty houses, they would be liquidated right now. And people could afford those houses because the prices would have dropped as interest rates went up. And they didn't because nobody's being forced to sell because there's demand, not oversupply. And so I think that we might see some more house price drops on average, nothing like a crash. And when things get bad enough and interest rates go back down, prices are going to skyrocket.
Hmm.
And so, in my opinion, over the next probably 2 to 3 quarters is a huge opportunity to buy, despite the fact that prices probably won't be falling. And then once interest rates come down, prices are going to start moving higher again, and then you can refinance. And as long as the deal makes sense right now, if it's cash flowing right, if you can make a cash flow right now when it's bad, it's only going to get better in the future. So I wouldn't buy a bad deal now just to get in. I'd still only do it if the deal makes sense. But I don't see a crash coming.
Well, and the other thing that I take into consideration is the fact that it's a great way to convert dollars into something real, which is, I think, is another thing that is obviously it's a it's a move to get rid of your cash, by sinking it into real estate. So I think that that's definitely, but that's a very interesting um look at it and take on it, and I'll have to give that to some consideration. Um, and do they're doing some real shenanigans with mortgages and the way they're actually kind of they're creating this '08 scenario with these new terms and conditions as far as what they're doing is they're penalizing people that actually have good credit, and they're transferring that cost of people with poor credit. They're transferring that cost to people with good credit. And do you think that the market will figure out a way to kind of like work around that without that being like an '08 type of correction?
Yeah, okay, so a couple things about that. Number one, it's disgusting.
It's terrible.
It's the, F.A. Hayek wrote a book called The Road to Serfdom. I think
Mhm.
this is closer to the road to the gulags. Like,
Yeah.
if you read the Gulag Archipelago, basically, they started looking at who was the richest people among them, and took everything away from them to give it to the rest of them, to the poorest or to whoever was doing the redistribution. But when that wasn't enough, because you take away the means of production from the most productive people, that means there's less being produced.
Yeah.
And so now everybody has less as a result, not more. And so now the problem's even worse. So instead of going to the richest, you just have to go to whoever looks richer. And eventually
Mm.
they got to the point where they would walk
It
into a
wasn't.
neighborhood, they would see which house was the biggest, they would kill them or send them to the gulag, take everything from that household, distribute it to everybody else. And then it became which house was just tallest. And then it became who had some animals still left alive. And Russia to this day still does not have the livestock built back up to pre gulag,
Mm.
because they killed so many animals. And so that's, I mean, it's minor compared to that, but it's still a step in that direction. It's
Mhm. Yep.
punishing the most productive, the people who have done the wisest and the most financially savvy things, and better for themselves, better for society, not going into debt, being, responsible, and punishing them and rewarding the people who haven't. In terms of the impact of that is almost nothing. When you have to zoom out on things like this and recognize that, okay, the adjustable rate mortgages that people are signing up for right now, these shenanigans with the mortgages, even the 40-year mortgages that people are talking about, it is such a small, tiny slice of what is happening over the last couple of years. Over the last 5 years or so, every single person who has bought a house has had on average a much higher credit score than everybody who was buying in 04, 05, 06, 07. Much higher better debt to income ratios. So just better borrowers. On top of that, the houses still to this day have way more equity than they ever did before, because of when they were bought. The rates on them are not adjusting. Everybody who owned a house already in 2020 and 2021 refinanced once or twice at 3%. Some
Mhm.
of them took cash out and were able to do stuff with it. But ultimately, you've got a situation where most homeowners are not going to be able to be forced to sell. And they'll hold on to it as their last dying breath, because if they let it go, then their financial lives get much worse.
Mhm.
And so I don't see those shenanigans that are happening right now having a severe impact on the real estate market. But I do see those steps as just being hugely negative overall in terms of the direction we're going as a country.
Yeah, just absolutely communistic psychopathy is it's so incredible to even think that it would even be considered, but it is absolutely wealth redistribution, and it's a shame. And hopefully um yeah, hopefully wiser wiser thoughts prevail. But this has really been a great conversation. I know that you got to get going, and I really appreciate you taking the time and just sharing some great ideas, giving us some different perspectives. And if this is the kind of information y'all are looking for, please go visit Heresy Financial. The link will be down below. Subscribe to Joe's channel. You're going to get a lot of incredible insight, and just I always like to just look at everything from uh, many different angles rather than just focus on certain talking points, because uh, you know I'm 47, and I'm not that old, but I've seen when I was in the financial planning field, I went through the dot-com bust. That was like my first year as like a junior advisor, and that was like 99, and I remember all that. And then I obviously remember the '08 debacle and crash. But one thing I have experienced is those that are fiscally sound and responsible and stay out of debt and develop the abilities and skills to generate income and then generate more income and look to store wealth, they have continued to thrive and succeed. And that's why that's the kind of things that I think we need to focus on. And what we talk about a lot on our channel is, yes, be aware of what's going on, but focus on things you can actually do rather than focus on the fear of what they, them, and those are doing and how out of control all of those things. Action cures fear, right? And so rather than just focusing on all the Orwellian stuff, focus on the different action steps that you can take every day, whether it's planning food, whether it's accumulating real estate, or whether it's rebalancing your portfolio, buying gold and silver or whatever. Focus on the stuff that you can actually do that's measurable, where you can look, because time goes by so fast. And, you look back and you're like, wow, I can't believe it's been 5 years, and I look at what we were able to accomplish since we relocated, and it really is unbelievable. And, we are blessed and we're very thankful for that. But, I think action is the key.
I agree. Yeah. Well said.
All right, Joe. Well, this is a value for value proposition. So if you do like the information that we provide, please go on over to TheTexasBoys.com and check out our merch and our unvaccinated organic honey and our teas and Texas native mud and our CBD and Lion's Mane coffee. We love you and appreciate you all. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next episode.